Number 2. Biology.
Many people think that dolphins and porpoises are exactly the same. Although they are similar in many ways, a dolphin is not a porpoise, and vice versa. There are both similarities and differences between the two. Let's learn about some of these similarities and differences. First, they're both mammals belonging to the scientific order Cetacea. This order includes all whales, to which both dolphins and porpoises are related. Second, both belong to the same scientific suborder Odontoceti. This suborder is made up of toothed whales. However, they do not belong to the same scientific family. Porpoises belong to the family Phocanidae, that's spelled Phocoenidae, and dolphins belong to the family Delphinidae, that's Delphinidae. Okay, now if we examine porpoises and dolphins at this level, they are as physically different as dogs and cats. Let's compare their physical characteristics. Porpoises are much shorter than dolphins but appear to be heavier. The porpoise's dorsal fin, that's the fin on the back, is triangular. The dolphin's dorsal fin is shaped like a wave. The dolphin has a very noticeable beak. The porpoise does not. Because they belong to the same scientific order and suborder, they share many of the same characteristics. For example, they are both completely aquatic mammals. They live in the water. They have a blowhole for breathing and a tail fluke. However, as mentioned before, they have many physical differences, including size and different shaped dorsal fins and beaks. Oh, and there was one more difference I forgot to mention. The dolphin is thin and sleek compared to the chubby porpoise. Remember, although they appear very similar to us, at the family level we can compare their relationship, as we did earlier, to the one between cats and dogs. So, physically speaking, dolphins and porpoises are different. But there are also behavioral differences between the two. Porpoises are shy while dolphins are not. Usually, porpoises only come up out of the water to breathe. Dolphins are social. They will often follow fishing boats. You are more likely to see a dolphin both in the wild and in captivity than a porpoise. Let's review what we have discussed today. If you happen to see a sleek mammal with a blowhole, a wave-like dorsal fin, and a beak playing in the water near a boat, what would it be? A dolphin. And if while scuba diving you ran across a chubby mammal with a blowhole and triangular dorsal fin that swam away when you came near, what would it be? A porpoise.
Number 3. Health.
What's the first thing that comes to mind when I say the word cancer? Did you think of a lump inside a person's body? Or problems with the stomach or brain? Well, certainly those are major concerns with cancer. But did anyone think of skin cancer? Skin cancer is actually a very common problem. I mean common enough where everyone in this room probably knows someone with skin cancer. Maybe that person doesn't have the most serious kind of skin cancer. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the kinds of skin cancer. We're going to talk about 3 kinds. I'll give you the technical names, but don't let that scare you. I'll spell them for you. Okay, so let's start with the most common and least dangerous kind of skin cancer. It's called basal cell carcinoma. I can see some wrinkled foreheads. Let's take the name apart. Basal cell, spelled B-A-S-A-L, and then cell plus carcinoma, C-A-R-C-I-N-O-M-A. As some of you probably already know, basal cells are the cells deep inside your skin. So this kind of carcinoma or cancer, is affecting those cells. Usually this kind of skin cancer appears as balls or bumps on the skin. The skin can also turn red and scaly. Fortunately, basal cell carcinoma is fairly easy to treat. Usually doctors can successfully remove this kind of cancer with little risk to other parts of the body. Now, the second most common form of skin cancer is called squamous cell carcinoma. You probably need that spelled out too. Squamous is spelled S-Q-U-A-M-O-U-S. The name of this type of skin cancer comes from the skin cells that it affects, the squamous cells of the skin. These are flat, plate-like skin cells. The key point to remember about squamous cell carcinoma is that it is more dangerous than basal cell carcinoma. It is more dangerous because it spreads to other organs in the body. Doctors can treat this kind of skin cancer with surgery, but they have to catch it early before it spreads. So now we are on to the third type of skin cancer that we're going to discuss today. The name of the third type is a little different than the first two types we talked about. This type is called malignant melanoma. In case the term malignant is unfamiliar to you, it means deadly or life-threatening. So malignant melanoma is the most dangerous type of skin cancer. Usually this kind of cancer appears on the skin as dark moles. The edges of these moles are not definite or regular, so they are dark, strange-looking moles. That's the first sign. Then, if these moles change shape or color over a short period of time, that's a big clue to doctors that the moles could be malignant melanoma. Like squamous cell carcinoma, this third type of skin cancer can spread through the body. In fact, it usually does spread, especially to the lymph system. We'll talk more at a later date about the effects of what happens in the body when malignant melanoma spreads. For now, just keep in mind that this type of cancer is very dangerous, and it spreads. Doctors can try to treat malignant melanoma with surgery or chemotherapy. I should emphasize that, though they can try to treat it, once this kind of cancer spreads, it's almost always fatal.
Focus B. Note diagrams 2. Summary. Number 1. Psychology.
Today, we will be talking a little about groups and how they can form. Groups can develop in various ways. One model proposes that there are 4 stages of creating a group. First, people must get along, or pretend to be friendly with each other. Once people act like they are on a friendly basis, the second stage can begin. The second stage is called storming. Here, politeness is not always respected. Group members test each other to see how the relationships may change. So group members make waves or cause small storms in the group. After the storming stage, normalization begins. In the normalization stage, the group members get used to each other and begin to act in cooperation. Finally,
Number 2. Earth science.
I would like to concentrate today on the structure or organization of the atmosphere. Remember that we can define atmosphere as the gases that surround our planet. That is, the atmosphere is the area between the Earth and outer space that is filled by gases. Scientists have discovered that the atmosphere is divided into different layers. In fact, there are 4 layers which compose the atmosphere. We'll talk about each layer one at a time. The first layer of our atmosphere is called the troposphere. We talk about the troposphere every day, even though we might not realize it. Do you know how we talk about the troposphere? The troposphere is the area of the atmosphere which controls most of the weather that we experience on Earth. So, when you think of the troposphere, think of weather. The troposphere is the thickest, near the tropics. The tropics, of course, are located near the equator. The thinnest part of the troposphere is located near the poles. So the thickness of the troposphere explains typical temperatures of a region. The thick nature of the troposphere near the equator provides insulation and gives that region warmer weather. The thin troposphere near the poles is responsible, at least in part, for the colder weather of those areas. So you can see how the troposphere is intimately related to our weather. The next layer up is called the stratosphere. There is very little weather in the stratosphere, but the stratosphere is still important to us. The importance of the stratosphere comes in the form of travel. What do you think travels in the stratosphere? Well, it isn't birds. In fact, it is airplanes that fly in the stratosphere. Although there is little weather in the stratosphere, some storm clouds may be present. The presence of these storm clouds explains why your plane ride can be bumpy at times. I don't have too much to say about the mesosphere, except that it is a very cold area. In fact, the atmosphere reaches its coldest temperature in the mesosphere. Here, the atmosphere has a temperature of about -90 degrees Celsius. That's darn cold. Finally, the last layer is called the thermosphere. The thermosphere is very thin. This layer is also important for travel, but a different kind of travel. Space travel. The space shuttle orbits in this area. So, the space shuttle passes through the layers I mentioned earlier to get to its orbit in the thermosphere.
Number 3. Art.
I hope all of you had a chance to visit the University Art Museum. I guess I'll find out for sure when I check the art journals you handed in today. For those of you who did go there, I'd like to build on what you saw in the modern art exhibit there. Think about the works you saw in terms of what I'm talking about during this lecture. Hopefully, when you consider these concepts in relation to those paintings, you will have a much better idea of what I am talking about. In particular, I want to talk about Cubism and Surrealism, 2 very distinctive styles of modern art from the 20th century. At first, you might think these 2 styles are completely different. It's true that artists of these styles were concerned about different things, but they did share at least one common idea. They both focused on abstraction. Neither Cubism nor Surrealism was meant to show reality. That wasn't what they were for. Let's talk a little bit more about Surrealism first. The object of Surrealism, or the point of Surrealism, is to meld or put together everyday reality and imagination. The artist tried to blend hard or concrete objects and situations with dreamlike images or fantasy. Usually this led to striking or surprising works. There were a few surrealist works in the exhibit at the museum. Or maybe you've heard of Salvador Dalí, probably the most famous surrealist of the 20th century. In our book, we can see one of Dalí's works called The Persistence of Memory. In this piece, The Persistence of Memory, you can see some clocks that look like they're melting over other objects. We see real-world objects, clocks, in a dreamlike or fantasy state, melting. Now we turn to Cubism. The interesting thing about Cubist paintings is that they try to show their subjects from multiple angles at once. The artist is showing both sides of a person's face at the same time, or the top and bottom of an object at the same time. Maybe you remember the painting of the cat from the museum. That was a Cubist work. In that painting, you could see the cat from different angles and even the background of the painting, the things behind the cat, intersected by the main subject, the cat itself. Intersecting the background with the subject is a second aspect of Cubism. Maybe it didn't look very much like a cat to some of you, but the artist was trying to go for that multiple angle effect. Probably the best works of Cubism were done by Pablo Picasso. We have a picture of Picasso's Woman in an Armchair in our book. You might not even recognize the woman in that one at first.
Practice test. Directions. In this section, you will listen to 2 conversations and 4 lectures. You will hear each conversation and lecture 1 time. After each listening passage, you will answer some questions about it. Most questions are worth 1 point, but some questions are worth more than 1 point. The directions indicate how many points you may receive. You will have 30 to 40 minutes to both listen and answer the questions. The questions ask about the main idea and supporting details. Some questions ask about a speaker's purpose or attitude. You may take notes while you listen. You may use your notes to help you answer. Your notes will not be scored. In some questions, you will see this icon. This means you will hear part of the conversation or lecture again. When you are ready, press Continue. Number 1. History. Listen to part of a lecture in a history class.
In this history course, we will focus on the history of American governments and institutions. I mean institutions within society, or parts of American society. The institutions include state, church, business enterprise, education, and family. We will look briefly at what each of these entail and what aspect of life they are responsible for influencing and directing. Historians have come to understand that, worldwide, each king and president has caused changes in the lives of individuals. These changes included the ways they earned a living, how they acted in their social lives, and the ways they dressed, worshipped, and went to school. It's important for you to understand that leaders had great control over the people they ruled. In past times, a king or leader had far more power and control over an individual's life, especially in terms of that person's freedom of choice. Again, kings and presidents influenced how a person earned a living, their social lives, dress, worship, and education. Please make sure you understand this about our history. From their understanding that leaders had such a great influence on each individual's life, historians became increasingly concerned with economic and social questions. They wanted to know why a certain economic or social event occurred, not simply what happened. Historians study past events the same way social scientists study present-day events. As a result, the differences or imagined lines that divide the social sciences and historical studies have gradually become less distinct. What I'm saying here is that historians and social scientists both study why something happens. The difference is that historians study events from the past, while social scientists study events in the present. I'm explaining this so that you won't be surprised during this semester when it seems like you're in a social studies course instead of a history course. As you will see, social factors strongly influence an individual's life. Society, of course, is made up of many individuals. Therefore, if some social factors are strongly affecting the individuals, this can strongly influence the society. In this course, we shall examine the development of the US through the study of the 5 main institutions I mentioned before. Again, these institutions are state, church, business enterprise, education, and family. Maybe we should clearly define the term institution. This can be rather difficult, but it can best be described as a formal organization designed to satisfy various needs in an individual's life. That's a long definition, so I'll repeat it for you. An institution is defined as a formal organization designed to satisfy various needs in an individual's life. For example, there is the state. The state is the means of satisfying the need for order and security. Then there are business institutions. Business institutions satisfy the need to produce and distribute the goods and services people require. Next is the church. The church looks after the religious instincts of the people. Fourth is education. Educational institutions seek to satisfy people's constant desire for betterment, to improve their lives. Finally, the family reflects stability and continuity in human relationships. Let's review this quickly again. State for order and security, business for goods and services, church for religion, education for betterment, and family for human relationships. It is important to understand that at any time in history, including the present, when you have discovered how people are educated, how they worship, how they earn their living, how they look after their families, and how they are governed, you have learned a lot about their lives. In this course, we will ask these basic questions in relation to the phases of American history. Of course, it is true that we know less about American education in 1741 than in 1941. However, for our purpose, this is not of great importance. What is important is that we ask the same questions about the 18th century education system in America as we ask about the 20th century system. We will examine religion, the family, business enterprise, and the state in the same manner.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 1. What is the talk mainly about? 2. According to the professor, what are 2 of the main institutions that have contributed to the development of America? Choose 2 answers. 3. What does the professor mean when he says this?
Again, kings and presidents influenced how a person earned a living, their social lives, dress, worship, and education.
Four. Are these statements true about the lecture? Click in the yes or no column. 5. What can be inferred about social science research from the lecture? 6. In the lecture, the professor explains the importance of each institution. Place them in the order that the professor lists each institution. Number 2. Psychology. Listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to learn about nature versus nurture. Maybe you've heard those terms before. Let's look at what they imply regarding behavior and thinking. We'll start with the nature side of the argument, which we will call the nativist side. Okay, on the nativist side, we have the belief that all human behaviors are inherent and innate. By inherent, we mean that they are passed down from generation to generation via the genes. By innate, we mean that they are not learned. People on the nativist side believe that our genes are more important than our environment in determining behaviors. Is everyone with me so far? Do you all understand that the nativists believe that our behaviors result from our genes, not our environments? Yes? Do you have a question?
Is this what you mean? If I worry a lot, it is because I carry a worry gene, not because I may have a mother who worries a lot. Am I right?
Exactly. Nativists would say that your worry behavior is gene-related and not related to your environment. Now, let's turn to the nurture side of the debate, which we call the social interactionist side. Social interactionists believe that the mind is a blank slate. This means that we are born without any predispositions. By this, I mean that our genes do not influence our behavior. All of our behaviors are a result of experience. Before we move on, let me just make sure you all understand the difference between a nativist and a social interactionist. Can someone offer an example that illustrates the difference between the two?
I think I can. A social interactionist would believe that anyone can learn to play the piano well, so long as they are exposed to piano playing in their environment. But the nativist believes that this ability would have to be in our genes, right?
Good example. I guess that's clear enough for everyone. Now, let's look at this in relation to language learning. We all speak at least one language, right? Try to remember learning your native tongue. Even though you have a lot more skills now than you did as a baby, it was a lot easier to learn your native language than a second language, wasn't it? Why is that? Human children seem to have this magical ability to learn language with very little effort. It is almost as if they are born with it. Is there a language gene that you inherit from your parents?
Excuse me, Professor. Are you suggesting that a child whose parents speak English will automatically speak English, even if that child is brought up by, let's say, Russian parents who speak only Russian? I find that hard to believe.
Good question. If you belong to the nativist school of thought, what you are saying is exactly right. Language is in all the genes, and this child should be able to speak English effortlessly as he or she begins speaking. However, a social interactionist would totally disagree with you and argue that language acquisition skills are totally dependent on the environment. A social interactionist would argue that this child would grow up speaking Russian as his or her native language. Here is an interesting story. An American couple decided to adopt a Chinese baby. Their friend thought it was a great idea, but worried that when the baby started talking, no one would be able to understand what she was saying. Ridiculous, right? Babies learn the language they are exposed to, regardless of the language their biological parents spoke. So no, there is not a language gene, but there does seem to be something innate about learning language. So, do we all agree that our native language depends on our environment? I see a hand. Yes?
I agree, Professor. I think that the language we learn growing up becomes our native tongue. But Professor, how do you explain that some people find it easy to learn second or even third languages, while others have great difficulty?
Excellent question. Let's go back to our earlier example of the adopted baby and say as a teenager that she wants to learn Chinese.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 7. What is the talk mainly about? 8. What will the professor discuss next? 9. Why does the professor mention the Chinese baby's adoption by an English-speaking couple. Ten. Based on the information in the lecture, indicate whether each phrase is true or false. Click in the yes or no column. (11) Why does the professor say this?
Is everyone with me so far?
12. In the lecture, the professor explains the social interactionist side of the debate. Summarize the lecture by putting the points in the correct order. Number 3. Writing. Listen to part of a lecture in a writing class.
Today, we will talk about the benefits of writing with a word processor rather than by hand or with a typewriter. At first, the act of putting my thoughts through the keyboard and onto the screen seemed like, well, hard work. Considering the average age of the people in this room, I suppose I must sound a bit technophobic. Anyway, I'm proud that I learned about computers because these days I work so much more efficiently. So you might be asking yourselves the question, what are the exact benefits when it comes to computers and writing? Let's look at some of those now. I should say that I won't be focusing on any one specific word processing program, so the terminology that I use might be a bit different from any PC that you might use. If you should encounter other terminology, you can always check the help function on whatever word processor you're using. All right, benefits. For those of you who feel more comfortable with an agenda, I'll write the main categories of this presentation on the board. I'm going to cover the benefits of writing with a computer in terms of planning, composing, organizing, revising, and editing. You can remember this acronym, PCORE: planning, composing, organizing, revising, editing. First, let's look at planning. We all know that free writing can be a good strategy for starting an essay, so I won't go into any detail about that strategy. I will say, however, that free writing on a word processor is more efficient than on paper. Why, you ask? It's because after you finish free writing, you can copy and paste your best ideas into a new file, which will serve as the basis for your essay. All word processors also have outlining functions that allow you to create a basic outline and then build on it as you go. Are there any questions about planning? No? All right then. Next, we will turn to composing. One major benefit of using a word processor to compose your essays is that it's so easy to go back and change your writing later. Basically, you can be, well, careless, in the short term at least, so that you record your ideas right away. That fact gives you so much freedom. For example, instead of writing whole sentences, we can write our ideas down with little thought about spelling or sentence structure. Extra details that we don't know yet can be indicated with X's or slashes. This is called slashing. Let me show you. You can start a sentence. My first point is, and then put 3 slashes after is. That shows you where you need to add more information later in the writing process. We can always go back later and fill these slashes in. It's also useful to abbreviate long terms that you must repeat over and over in your text. Then you can do a global find and replace the abbreviation with the full expression. A good example is to write BE instead of biomedical engineering, going back to replace it later in one easy motion. Yes, Devin?
I'm sorry, Professor. Please excuse my ignorance about computers. What do you mean by do a global find and replace? I've never heard that term before.
Listen, Devin, don't worry. Thank you for asking that question. Can anybody else shed some light on that? Charles?
Well, I can only speak for Microsoft Word because that's what I use. It's really easy. You just go to the Edit menu and select Replace. The program will prompt you to type the word or phrase it should find and also the word to replace it with. When you click on the button that's labeled Replace All, it will do exactly that. Every time it finds that word or phrase in your document, it will replace it with the new term. It saves a lot of time.
Does that answer your question, Devin?
Yes, thanks, Charles. I use Word, so I'll check it when I get home.
Good. All right, let's move along.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 13. What is the discussion mainly about? 14. According to the professor, in which technique could the find, replace be useful? 15. Why does the professor say this?
Can anybody else shed some light on that?
16. Is each of these topics discussed in the lecture? Click in the Yes or No column. 17. Listen again to part of the discussion. Then answer the question.
What do you mean by do a global find and replace? I've never heard that term before.
Listen, Devin, don't worry.
Why, most likely, does the professor say this?
Listen, Devin, don't worry.
18. In the lecture, the professor describes the steps involved in writing. Put the steps in the correct order. Number 4. Campus life.
Listen to part of a conversation between a student and a librarian. Excuse me. I was wondering if you could answer a couple of questions I have about library services. I'm a little confused and I could really use some help. That is, if you have a moment.
Oh, of course. It's my job. It would be no trouble at all. What can I help you with?
I've been looking at this pamphlet that explains the ways that we can find help with research. I mean, most of it is straightforward and pretty self-explanatory. But this one, this real-time help, I don't get it. Like, what is it?
Ah, yes. We often get questions about that. It's a new service that we're quite proud of, actually. Real-time help is useful when you're searching the online catalog at home. Instead of using email, we now have a link on the library website. To use it, you have to log on to our library website, then click on Advanced Options. After you click the Advanced Options, look for the Utilities menu choice. Click on Utilities. You will see an icon labeled Talk.
If you click on that icon, you can chat with a librarian in real time. That means your typed question will be answered right away while you're sitting there. No waiting around for someone to respond to your email.
Wow, what a good idea. To be honest, I gave up on the email help service because it was often faster and easier just to walk to the library. And sometimes I would have to wait a few days before I got a response. One other thing. My computer is quite old, so I was wondering if I need any special software to use this, what's it called again? Real-time help service?
That's right. You've got the name right. Absolutely not. If your software can access the library website, then you have everything you need to use real time.
Great. When's real-time help available? What I mean is, what are the hours?
During the fall semester, you can access this service from Monday to Thursday between 9 a.m. and 10:30 in the evening. Friday has shortened hours between 9 and 4:45 p.m. On the weekend, we've just expanded the hours. Now, where did I put that memo? Aha! Here it is. Yes, on Saturday, it's available from 11 a.m. to 4:45 p.m. and Sunday from 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. I'm sorry, did you get all that? Soon there's going to be a new pamphlet with the current time schedule. You should pick up one of those so that you are familiar with the times.
So is real-time help only available to students?
It's for currently registered students, faculty, and library staff only.
Cool. What kind of questions can I ask?
We would hope that students would restrict their questions to the library and the online catalog as well as internet information. With so many students and staff members, we don't want people to have to wait to use the service, so we suggest a time limit per session of 15 minutes.
Is there anything that's off limits? Like anything that we can't ask?
Well, we're not experts on every topic that students are working on. That means that any kind of detailed or specific questions about research should be directed to your professors. Also, any queries about fines or due dates of materials you've signed out should go to the circulation desk.
Okay, thanks. I understand. You've helped me a lot. Thanks a million.
It's my pleasure. Good luck with your research.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 19. What is the discussion mainly about? 20. According to the librarian, what software does the student need in order to use real-time help? 21. What does the librarian mean when she says this?
I'm sorry, did you get all that?
22. What can be inferred about the real-time help service? 23. Listen again to part of the conversation. Then answer the question.
It's for currently registered students, faculty, and library staff only.
Cool.
How does the student feel about real-time help? 24. In the conversation, the librarian describes the process of using real-time help. Put the steps in the correct order. Number 5. Health. Listen to part of a lecture in a health class.
Today we are going to consider the history of disease and disease prevention. Try to imagine, if you will, a large city in the early 19th century. What images do you see? How would cities then have been different from cities today? First of all, they didn't have any cars, right? So no dirty exhaust smoke or fumes. But then again, people got around by horse and buggy, and these horses left manure everywhere. That couldn't have smelled too good. Okay, so we've got horse manure all over the place. What else? Cities back then didn't have adequate garbage collection and disposal, so garbage piled up on the streets, sometimes up to 3 feet high. Dead animals were everywhere, water accumulated in the carcasses of these dead animals, and we haven't even gotten to the plumbing. They didn't have adequate sewer systems as it was, and all of the garbage and animal remains everywhere clogged up the sewer drains. Most houses used an outhouse for human waste, and some were more like shallow trenches in the ground. Outhouses were sometimes located next to wells, which meant that the fluids could flow into the drinking water. In a word, cities in the early 19th century stank. We know now that these conditions create a breeding ground for infectious diseases. It will not surprise you one bit to learn that diseases like typhoid, typhus, malaria, yellow fever, pneumonia, diphtheria, and tuberculosis were rampant in cities. Children were particularly at risk, and most families didn't expect their children to reach adulthood. This was a fact of life. Now, keep in mind that although the problem and its solution seem obvious to us, they didn't have the knowledge of bacteria and the spread of disease that we have today. For a long time, diseases were actually thought by some people to be caused and spread by immoral behavior. However, in the early 19th century, it was becoming clear that these diseases were in some way related to unsanitary conditions in the cities. In fact, some thought that disease was spread by the smell itself. Then along came germ theory. Now at first, many were skeptical of the idea that such tiny bacteria could cause such a major problem. However, over time, as medical professionals studied these diseases and discovered that different microorganisms were associated with different diseases, people became convinced. Now it was obvious that prevention of disease epidemics lay in the sanitation of the city, so they cleaned it up. But of course, this didn't completely rid the cities of disease. For example, typhoid is a waterborne bacterial infection. Naturally, when they cleaned up the water, they expected the typhoid to go away, but it didn't, not entirely. What did germ theory have to say about that? Well, scientists learned that people could be carriers of a disease. People who had been exposed to the disease and had recovered could still spread the disease to others. This discovery had important ramifications. Now, the responsibility to prevent disease lay not only on society, but on the individual as well. Efforts were made to increase awareness of personal hygiene and to identify carriers of disease. Can you imagine what it would be like to be identified as a carrier? Here's a famous example. Mary Mallon, known as Typhoid Mary, was an Irish immigrant to New York who made her living as a cook. She worked in the houses of several wealthy families in the area. In 1906, she was hired by a banker to cook for his family of 11 in his rented summer home. When 6 of these 11 people became ill with typhoid, the owner of the house became worried that he would be unable to rent it again, so he hired a civil engineer to identify the problem. After checking the water system and other possible sources, he identified the cook, Mary, as the probable cause. By tracing her job history, he found that there had been typhoid outbreaks at other places where she'd been employed. She was then forced to undergo tests, and once she was identified as a carrier, had to live in isolation in the custody of the Board of Health for the rest of her life.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 25. What aspect of 19th century cities does the professor mainly discuss? 26. What is the professor's attitude towards cities in the early 19th century? 27. Why does the professor mention germ theory? 28. In the lecture, the professor explains about the life of Typhoid Mary. Put the events in order. (29) What does the professor imply when he says this?
After checking the water system and other possible sources, he identified the cook, Mary, as the probable cause.
(30) Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
Children were particularly at risk, and most families didn't expect their children to reach adulthood. This was a fact of life.
Why does the professor say this?
This was a fact of life.
Number 6. Campus life. Listen to part of a conversation between two students.
Hey, Miguel, have you been lately?
Stressed. I have to do this big project for my government class, and I need to use a computer to do it. This is my first assignment this year, and I don't know much about the computer facilities here on campus. Say, you don't know anything about how the computer labs work here, do you?
Actually, I worked as a part-time student employee in one of the open labs for 2 semesters. What do you want to know?
Wow, great. Where to begin? Well, first of all, where are they? I know there are quite a few labs spread throughout the school, but I am not sure where they are.
Well, the open labs are in Murphy Hall and in the basement of the library. There is also another lab just for liberal arts majors in the Arts Building.
Oh, okay. They're all there together. Are they open 24 hours?
Unfortunately, no. They're open from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5:30 on Friday. During the fall and spring semesters, they're open Saturday and Sunday until 5.
Uh-huh. And do they offer any kind of training on the computers?
Yes, they do actually. They hold computer training workshops twice a month. You can sign up for one in the library. There are also instructional tutoring sessions for students who need help with their coursework in the individual labs, and of course, individual assistance is available too.
Can I just walk in and start using a computer, or do I need a password or something?
You do need a student account and password to show that you actually attend the university. Once you show them your student ID card, they will set up an account for you and give you a password. Actually, I have a pamphlet in my bag if you want to take a look. It should have some of that information.
Yeah, sounds good. Hey, this says I can only use the computer for 1 hour. Then I have to check out of the lab. Why is there a 1-hour limit?
Well, there are only 30 computers, so that way all students can get an opportunity to use them. Last year, some of the waiting lines were getting very long, and people complained about waiting for long periods of time. Some people couldn't complete their assignments on time.
Ah. It says here I need a diskette? Why is that? Do they sell them there?
Well, because so many students use the computers, all the information on the hard drives is deleted at the end of the day, so you'll need a floppy disk if you want to save any of your work. They don't sell them in the computer labs. In fact, the only place you can buy them on campus is at the bookstore.
Okay, I think I've got that. What about printing? Does it cost anything?
No, but they're kind of strict about how much you print. The rule is 1 copy per person per document. Multiple copies aren't permitted.
What about eating and drinking?
That's not allowed either. Someone damaged one of the iMacs last year with some grape soda, and that was the end of that. Also, space is pretty tight, so they don't allow more than 1 person at a computer. That encourages people to talk, which can distract other people from working.
Wow, I feel like I'm an expert on the computer labs now. Anything else I should know?
Not that I can think of. Well, actually, you study programming, don't you? Well, you're not allowed to install any software that isn't registered to the university.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you answer. 31. What are the speakers mainly discussing? 32. What is the woman's attitude toward the computer labs on campus? (33) According to the woman, what does the man need to do to save his work? (34) Is each of these points discussed in the conversation? Choose yes or no. (35) According to the conversation, what is the policy regarding printing? (36) Listen again to part of the conversation and answer the question.
Actually, I worked as a part-time student employee in one of the open labs for 2 semesters.
What can be inferred about the woman?